So I chose three of my millions of questions.
Okay.
And first of all, I would like to ask you, what is the main and the most popular problem that you have with your clients?
I mean, I think, to be honest, one of the biggest issues that I see most clients and brands face is the answer to a question that I ask pretty much everybody. And it's, if you take your products out of the conversation, how are you communicating with your community?
Of course.
And that's really troubling, because a lot of them say, well, what are you talking about? We're a product, like, or we're a service, right? Like, that's what we do. That's what we communicate. And that just goes to the conversation where it's like, well, if everything that you do is about your products and about your services, that means that everything you're doing is a sell. And if everything that you're doing is a sell, that means that all your metrics are about sales. And that's where a lot of businesses and brands lose, because there's a lot of different ways to, accumulate data in different ways. So sales is definitely one of them, but there's also engagement, and there's followers, and there's comments, and there's also visits, to your website or to your links. It's downloads. Like, there's a lot of things there. And so I think that is the first question I like to ask, because all of a sudden it puts us in the right context, in the right frame of mind to say, oh, okay, that's probably what our main problem has been. And that's probably why we're here, because all we're trying to do is sell, and it's not going according to plan.
So have you ever left behind a project that was too hard to handle?
No, I mean, I have a really systematic approach to this. So I've created something called my holistic method. And business and fashion is not as romantic as people think that it is. It's really pragmatic. Like, when you look at fashion as a business, I mean, I won't work with anybody who's completely doing things for the wrong reasons. If our ethics don't align, then there's certain criteria that I need to follow in terms of who I take on as clients. But once I take on my clients, it's really straightforward. I have a very concise, very specific process that is not necessarily about fashion or clothing or products. It's really about building brand and business and integrating the two through a method that I put everybody through. So I never really struggle with getting to the end result. It's just a matter of understanding where we're starting.
Okay. Yeah, in fact, I was listening to your podcast with Flow Insider.
Cool.
And you talked about your job as holistic brand consultant. In your perspective, what is fundamental, the strategic mindset. So I would like to ask you to give me 3 keywords to describe the perfect strategic mindset. And do you think this mindset can be used not just in the work field, but in our everyday life, actually?
Well, so my strategic mindset is really about how you process information and situations. And as a business, as a brand, whether you're a designer, a founder, a CEO, a business partner, whatever that is, we tend to forget that that's a massive component in building business, the mindset part of it, right? Because everything affects everything. And when I say holistic, not only does everything internally affect everything internally, but also your mindset and how you approach these things and how you're thinking about things really affect the rest, and vice versa, right? If your business isn't functioning properly, it's going to affect you. And if you're not processing in the right way and in the right headspace, it's going to affect your business. So there's levels there that I work with. And the strategic mindset part generally comes up in process. It's through conversations and communications with my companies, with my clients and brands and just general people, when I get interviewed and when I talk to people just kind of in the real world. A lot of the same things tend to really kind of come up in terms of how they look at the industry or what fashion actually is, and so these conversations get a bit more interesting when it's a bit more specific to the person. But I think that when it comes down to 3 key words for mindset, the strategic mindset, I would say one of them is patience. I think the other one is empathy. And the other one would be fortitude.
Last but not least, you faced the failure topic. I know that you don't like this word, as you said during the podcast, But where do you think there is the edge between the failure and the growth?
So that's kind of where my point is, where like it's all growth, right? So the only failure that I see is when you quit and you give up. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily like failure, because you can move on to something else that you really love doing, and then you're succeeding in that space. So I don't see the word failure as like a finite end to something.
Okay.
I think that growth is one of those things that are important. So I work with a lot of people on reframing, and sometimes the words that we use affects the way that we think about things and the way that we act and the way that we react, right? So when you look at something as growth, like I've grown a lot over the 20 years that I've been in this industry. Now, I've made mistakes, but I've learned from them. Not everything went according to plan. I haven't landed every single client. Not every strategy has gone according to plan. But that's the part of growth that people need to be aware of, because it's learning and it's understanding and it's evolving. Now, if you make a mistake and you don't learn from it, and you do the same mistake over and over and over and over again, well, then inevitably you're going to fail because you're not growing. You're not opening up your mind to change. And so you're kind of like by default failing because you're not evolving and you're not growing, right? So that's kind of how I look at it. I think that in this kind of culture we have right now with social media and the way that it's kind of drawn us to, looking for reactions or results right away, has really triggered a lot of these types of words, right? Failure being one of them. Like, oh, I'm failing because I'm not as popular as this person, or I don't have this many followers, or I'm not making this much money. But I think that ultimately, when you look at it, it's really about going back to the three words that I mentioned before, right? So the first one is patience. And I think that,
it takes time.
It takes time. Listen, when I first started my first business in 2001, and way before that too, and also after that, like, usually 3 years was the kind of like checkpoint to see if your business was even viable or if it was making money. And now if people don't make $1 million, or they don't, in the first year, or if they don't sell out their first collection, well, they think that they're a failure. And so patience is really, really important. And that's why I mentioned that before. Fortitude is also a word that I mentioned. And fortitude is having the resilience to go through failures. I call them growth cycles, but to be able to have the strength and the courage to go through constant growth cycles, to be able to endure and to grow through them, so you get better and you get stronger. And a lot of people, it's a matter of having a really big setback and not being able to bounce back because they're scared now, right? They told everyone they were going to do something and it didn't work out the first time, and they feel embarrassed, and they're like, well, I don't want to do that again. But I've failed, in quotes, tons of times, but they've led me to growth that has allowed me to succeed on higher and higher levels, because I've been able to harness that. And over the fortitude that I've had over the last 20 years, really harness that to be able to understand that there is no failure. It's a word that people need to get out of their system, because once you remove that word, you have to substitute it with something else.
Yeah, of course.
It could be learning, it could be growth. You know what I mean? Like, it could be anything that serves you. But I think that focusing on what serves you over things that are breaking you down is important.
Thank you very much. It was really, really a pleasure to listen to you. And thank you for your answers. And thank you for listening.
Yeah, you're very, very welcome. And listen, the best with all your studies. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, Alice.
Thank you very much for your time, and have a good day.
Thank you, you too.
Thank you.
Ciao.
Bye.